When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. Oh, I won't be afraid. Just
welcome, welcome. This is OnlineRebels meetup, and we are here to discuss, share our experiences and memories about balconies during COVID-19. We have 4 friends. This is going to be a panel discussion, and four friends from Toronto Philosophy Meetup will be sharing their own experiences with us, and this is going to be an empathy conversation where we will be able to join in with our comments and questions, and I will be just minding about time. Please feel free to use the chat box as like a hallway or water cooler center where you can just take a break from the speakers, and I will be recording the chat box. And there are sometimes chat box conversations get super funny, so please feel free to be yourselves there. So we have Carl, Kathy, Alex. James was gonna meet us, but I think he has something going on, so we'll see. Maybe he might just walk in. Let's say hi to Carl. Carl, would you like to tell us shortly about yourself?
Hey, I'm Carl, and I've recently, well, not recently, but joined the philosophy meetup right around the pandemic as a way to sort of get my interest into philosophy and, really expose myself to all the ideas and questions that the philosophers have been trying to answer. I'm what you call like an emerging philosopher, I suppose, and I am trying to read and familiarize myself with the material. And this meetup has been really conductive in a sense that I am exposed to everyone's ideas, and not just the ancient philosophers, but people around me, people in Toronto. And now with the pandemic, I am exposed to other people's ideas from across the globe. Today, I'll be sort of going over this, just a brief history of the balcony, not too intensive because I'm not an expert in balconies. I just use it.
Okay, you're not an expert in the balcony. I think that why. Oh goodness, we have a new saying now, do we? Don't we?
It's from based on the research I've done, the word balcony was really derived from a lot of different languages. Like in Italian, it comes from
Carl,
balcone. Yes.
can I ask you to just take a break, and I'll ask Kathy and Alex to say hi, and then we'll start the discussion. Kathy, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everybody. So my name is Kathy, or Katerina. So I also joined the Toronto Philosophy Group, I think back in January. And I've been learning a lot, and it's been a great opportunity to meet a lot of different people and to learn a lot about philosophy. It's interesting. My ancestors were Greek, and I found it interesting. I didn't know a lot. But I've been able to, since joining the group, I've been learning a lot from a lot of different people, and I've been really enjoying it. I've also been following of what's been going on. Like Carl, I'm not an expert in balconies, but I've been kind of following videos and different things about what's been going on. And I'm going to just be talking about more of the social aspects of what balconies, and especially in today's pandemic.
Thank you. Alex?
Everybody, I'm Alex. I've been a member of the Toronto Philosophy Meetup for probably a couple of years now, and involved in putting on some events for the last maybe 6 months, a little bit more. Yeah, so whenever asked me to say a few things about balconies, it was, I mean, I'm not an expert on balconies either, except I've always had a balcony in every place that I've lived in my life. But beyond that, there was not much more. But I thought it was an interesting topic, and so I think it's cool to see. This is kind of a new thing for me. This kind of like a panel conversation, and I hope it's gonna. I hope actually it's gonna be we're gonna say our bits, and then we'll have a larger discussion. I'm thinking of focusing on sort of the more symbolic aspect of what a balcony is, especially at this time right now. And I want to try to connect it to the idea of grounding. And I think that's important for us to think about, not just because of this pandemic, but because of a lot of other things that are going on in the world these days. I think grounding may be something that we need. And I think but the balcony might be a kind of reminder of that. So that's what I'm going to try to say.
Thank you. So I guess we all agree that we are not an expert on balconies, but we have things to share. I'd like to just, before letting Carl share his thoughts, I'd like to share one thing that I experienced with Toronto Philosophy Meetup during this COVID pandemic. As an ADHDer, as a little girl who had ADHD, I was sent to my room a lot. And if it was summer or spring, I would be sent to the balcony. So I was super used to watching outside my friends playing from the balcony until I was done with my time out, because I was in trouble too much as a kid. So in that stressed moments, stressed times that I had to stay away, it was kind of like a punishment, but I think I found a way to turn that time out time to really experience and watch outside, because I was in the balcony witnessing what's happening. And as a child, I never believed, I never thought that it won't end. So I always knew as a child that, yeah, this will be over. I will be able to go out again, and I will forget all this trouble I went through because of my fast functioning brain. So when we first started our online meetings with Toronto Philosophy Meetup, it was a very chaotic time. We all didn't know what was coming. I think we were able to switch this meetup group to a balcony where we were able to heal ourselves with reasoning, asking ourselves what just happened, what happened in the history, how did this happen in the philosophic perspective? Did this happen in the history? So we had very long meetups, and I think all those get-togethers and sharings we had with Toronto Philosophy Meetup really made me believe that, okay, this balcony time will go over and we'll continue with our lives. So that's how these meetup discussions and hopefully OnlineRebel discussions will continue to serve people in a way. And all of a sudden, whenever we had chance, we found ourselves talking about balcony. So I know, Carl, Kathy, and Alex, you will find a way to connect balcony to your own area of interests. Without further ado now, Carl.
All right, so I'm just gonna go like a sorry, I'm gonna go just like a brief history of the balcony and maybe help it connect to the topics at hand. That word balcony is actually derived from a lot of languages. Like in Italy, there is the word balcone, which meaning scaffold. In High German, there's balco, which is beam. In Persian, there's balcone, which I mean, it probably means something else. Like, but back to the topic at hand. The earliest balconies have been dated back to even ancient Greece, thousands of years ago. They've been used as they're used functionally to increase air circulation in hot climates and enhance like the natural lighting of a building's interior. It was mainly used as a function, not like what we use it right now. Like even in ancient Mesopotamia, they built hanging parapets to shade the street from the scorching sun. So it is as a way to like alleviate yourself from the sun, which is just not very pleasant when you're under it. Now, over time, these platforms as balconies have really evolved to the space where it could become the space where you captivate, you unify, and inspire the masses. That the way that balconies have been used in history. In ancient Egypt, the palace, if you call it palace, built balconies as a theatrical setting. In ancient Rome, even the earliest balconies, the one they used in the Colosseums, the emperors and the senators go on these balconies, this open air platform, to both watch the gladiators compete and for the masses to see them as a way to admire and also cultivate the community spirit. Not that I, value the killing of people in front of the mass. um, I mean, like, back to the topic of admiration, like Romeo and Juliet, those romantic scenes were played on a balcony. Like the royal family, when they address their subjects, it's on that very famous balcony, overlooking the family, overlooking the masses, and the masses look in awe, or if, in some cases, envy, right? Over time, the balcony design sort of evolved towards the building's materials and the building's architectures. They were used as a way, especially in European cities, as a way to introduce this air circulation and introduce the lighting into this cramped space, so that you don't really feel that suffocating feeling when you're inside the city. And it has, in the 19th century, as Europe underwent like a period of intense urbanization, balconies have become this symbol of metropolitan lifestyle, and it inspired many writers and poets and artists. But now, in this age, it's this age of air conditioning, TV, technology, we've really, from my point of view, it's really driven people indoors most of the time. Like when I live on the 29th floor of an apartment, all I see people use their balconies are just storage places, something functional like it did back in ancient Greece. And with this forced isolation, there's this resurgence of the use of the balconies to like I said, to unify, to actually introduce this new grammar for intimacy and connection with other people. It's like in my area, in my neighborhood, at 7:30, Aaron goes out and bangs pots and pans to show support for the frontline workers. And from this, you get that sense of community, that sense of unity and admiration for the community as a whole, like it did back in ancient Rome and in ancient Greece. And it really has become this liminal space between public and private life. You're not always inside. You can take yourself from this static existence and put yourself out there and join the public at hand, but from a safe area. And I guess this is where I branch off to what Kathy is saying, which is, this is a balcony story. So.
Great. Thanks, Carl. So definitely Carl touched on a lot of different things in terms of what balconies can bring. I quickly went online today and I just was curious to see how many people are using balconies. And back in 2017, the American Housing did a survey, And they found that across the top 15 most populated metropolitan areas, only 62% of renters had access to balconies, patios, decks, or a porch. So that is quite interesting, and especially when you take a look at a city like the size of Toronto. I wasn't able to get some Toronto stats, but one of the things is that, you know, with Toronto and the design that Toronto is now, that you're seeing a lot more condos are being built, and you see a lot more high rises, and with that, people are not being able to access their back doors or backyards, or having a place to go out and get some fresh air. So definitely a balcony could help with that. And also, like Carl had mentioned, a lot of people are not really using the balconies as much. They're using it as more as storage spaces, but unfortunately that is a fire hazard. And so this is something that people really have to be careful of when they're using that. But when you take a look at a balcony, I mean, it is a way that people are able to, I mean, definitely be able to use it and be able to go outside. People are using it for all different reasons, and it could be definitely a form of expression. So, and we've been seeing this a lot more during the COVID pandemic, or COVID-19 pandemic, where people are going out. It's, you know, we've seen in the last several years flash mobs. Well, people are using the balcony as their own flash mobs. So they're, you know, people in Italy, they would be going outside and they would be singing. There's a lot of really interesting YouTube videos where people are making jokes about being on a balcony, and they're serenading their neighbors, or they're just wishing people like a happy birthday, or they're honoring a lot of the healthcare service workers, which is so incredibly important. But again, if you take a look at history, balconies have also been used for other, you know, for stating a lot of other different causes and things like that. I also think that it is, again, like as I mentioned earlier, coming from a European background and seeing my relatives in Greece, they have used the balconies as a way of going outside and getting some fresh air. And it has also been, for the high-rise buildings, it's been a great opportunity for allowing a lot of the air that will come through. But and especially with what's going on with right now, and people not being able to go outside and people not being able to communicate, people are actually finding different ways of using balconies, as I mentioned. I even saw a YouTube video where people were actually playing tennis back and forth using a balcony, which was quite funny. And then people are, they're singing. Some singers are actually going out on their balconies, and they're singing to a lot of different people. Or, you know, it's just another form of expression. So yeah, so that's my part. Alex, would you like to talk a little bit more about yours?
Alex, before you go, would you like to open up for questions or comments with participants? Anybody like to share any comments or questions or personal experiences? Feel free to mute yourselves if you'd like to speak out.
So a question I would have for the group is, does anybody live in an apartment, and does anybody have a balcony? And if so, how are you using it?
Well, I live in an apartment, and I have a balcony, and I can't say that I use it very much. It's there. I did use it today, though, because I had rinsed out some shelves from the fridge and I set them out in the sunlight to dry. But I don't think that's, you know, very, you know, efficient use of the balcony. And also the tiles on the balcony are all breaking up because the ceiling slab from the floor above me has started to crack. So my tiles don't stay down, and I have a big dispute with property management. So balconies in newer high rises are not like they were in the old days. However, if I have any kind of an inaugural speech to make or anything like that, I'll probably make it from my balcony.
Okay.
So you have it in the blood, Joel. Peter, do you have a sharing now?
Well, no, I'm not in Toronto. I'm in Kyoto, Japan.
Okay.
Oh.
And but I don't have a balcony here. But I had a great balcony when I was living in Toronto, which is a small wraparound balcony, and it used to even have a turf like as if it was a lawn out on it, which was very nice. And it had a kind of a low fence on it. It was on the 14th floor. Actually, it was the 13th floor, but you couldn't say 13th floor. You know, we had this thing about bad luck, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was called the 14th floor. And I used to try to decide on a hot night whether to sleep out on this balcony or not. Well, the fence was kind of low. And it was up quite high. So I had to always make the decision, but it was such a great feeling. I mean, if I happened to be a sleepwalker, I suppose I could have just gone right over the edge. So I don't know if I slept very well, but I slept very cool. And I miss that balcony very much. And as I say, living here where I am now, I don't have a balcony. And I do miss it.
So
Okay,
Peter,
I'll pass it over.
Peter, I'm curious to hear more about where you're living now. How would you describe us where you live? What part of Japan are you at now?
I'm in Western Japan in Kyoto.
Mm-hmm.
It's about it's from here to Tokyo is kind of like going from Toronto to Montreal.
Okay. Like, are they high rises or townhomes? Like, what is the living style?
Kyoto has a rule, nothing higher than 18 floors anywhere, even hotels. So there's nothing really, really high here. And there aren't a lot of high-rise apartment buildings. I live in an apartment building now, and it's just 2 floors, and there are only 6 apartments in it. So it's very comfortable.
So is there any balconies around, or is it like a no balcony city?
Well,
or is it only you don't have it?
Actually, there is a small, I suppose, somebody at the other side of my apartment that you could use as a balcony, but like somebody said, we just use it kind of for storage. But you go out the front door and there's the stairway going down. So you could almost sit out there, but people would kind of look at you because it's basically for just going up and down the stairs. So, but I have a nice window here and it's great. I have a beautiful view. There's a lot of green around here. But I certainly miss the balcony in Toronto.
Last but not least, what time is it now here, there?
Yeah. Here it's 20 to 8 in the morning.
Okay.
Of the next morning from you. So it's the 25th of May here. So it's your tomorrow morning.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight, Peter.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Always nice to hear you.
Great.
So, Alex, would you like to go next?
Sure, yeah, I can do that. I wanted to say, Kat, in response to your question, I remember when we first came to Canada, so I was 13 when we arrived, and we arrived from Europe. And, it took some getting used to, like North American cities, especially. That was very new, with the high rises and I'm from Eastern Europe originally. But I remember when we first visited Montreal, it was such a familiar sight because, you go through Montreal and you have all of these triplexes with the balconies, right? And there are these traditional, I guess they're French balconies of sorts. And there's just so many of them. And it's, I think it gives the city a really beautiful, it's probably one of the very few European cities that you have in North America. And I guess we have that association of, the balcony is somehow there's a European kind of flair to it. Whether that's a good thing or not, I'm not sure. But anyway, so that was coming to mind. So in terms of talking about the balcony, so Carl covered the history, and Kat, you covered the some of the social, kind of relational aspects. And I was thinking of maybe looking at kind of the symbolic meaning of a balcony. And there's probably a lot that we can say there. And Carl, I really liked the reference to Romeo and Juliet. There's this kind of romantic thing about balconies, right? And I was thinking of going a different way and a little bit. And coming from, I guess you could say, a kind of phenomenology perspective. So we've been reading some of that in some of the reading groups, and I'm finding it very interesting. And the basic idea is, you take something like a balcony, which seems to be like this isolated thing. But what you actually find is nothing is isolated, but everything, even something like a balcony, has all of these meanings and all of these connections. And they're sometimes called horizons. So, you look at the balcony, but there's these horizons that it opens up in every direction. And I mean, I think you guys, Carl and Kat, already covered some of those. What I wanted to do was talk a little bit about, so what struck me was when Eva suggested this topic, and I was thinking, okay, so you go out on a balcony and what happens? And two things come to mind. For me at least, you look out and you actually see the ground, right? Like you can look down and you can see how high you actually are. And if you're just inside, you could forget that you might be, Carl, I think you said you were like on the 23rd or 24th floor?
29th.
29th floor, okay, yeah. So do you ever get this thing where like you're inside and you kind of forget how high you are? Does that happen to you?
Yes, because you are like, for me, I'm always inside. I don't usually go out on my balcony. Like this balcony thing has been recently like a new thing for me. Like I've ordered
Right.
stuff from IKEA to just make it a nice space for me to go outside. But when I look down, I really get a perspective of how high I am. Like I even have to like hold my glasses a little bit because I'm scared I might fall off.
Right, yeah, so that makes a lot of sense to me. And for me, the other thing that comes up is a kind of, I guess it's a fear of falling, and it's, I mean, I know, yes, I'm holding on, of course, nothing's gonna happen, but there's still this thing in the back of your mind, back of my mind at least, like, this would be a pretty bad fall, like, that will be, that will be the last fall. Well, depending how far you are, but, how high you are. And so I wanted to take that idea, especially that idea of grounding, and relate it kind of more symbolically, because I'm thinking that this whole epidemic might actually be a bit of a wake-up call for us, and I kind of hope actually that it is. And the balcony, I think, maybe symbolizes that a little bit. So it's kind of like we now have the chance to walk out and see where we actually are and how high up we've climbed. And there are three things that come to mind that I think we've really lost our grounding. Like we've really disconnected from, like the roots, disconnected from what we stand on. So one of these things is obviously the environmental crisis, I think. Like we've literally disconnected from the earth, right? And I think that's a loss of grounding for sure. So so I think there we need to find ways, and actually very, very quickly, how do we get back to a kind of sustainable connection? How do we get our feet back on the ground? I think another way that we've done this is the whole economic situation. And I mean, with this pandemic, we see it. Like, I mean, I didn't know this, but like in the beginning, when the news started to come out and all the people losing their jobs, turns out like 50% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. That's pretty crazy. And that's, I mean, in the States, it's also like that. Europe, I think maybe a little bit better, but probably not a lot. And I think we've had decades and decades of a kind of economy where a few people get very rich, and the economy is really not working for most people. So I think that's in a way, it's like we've lost grounding with sort of each other or community or our own basic needs. And I think that's something that we need to work on. And the third thing that came to mind is social media and technology and screens and constant like information overload. And that to me is sort of like losing touch with ourselves and sort of our own grounding, like in our own bodies, and that mindfulness and sort of that sense of self that can really go missing. And so in a strange way, I think, I mean, for me at least, like we're on Zoom all the time now, right? But in a way, it doesn't feel, it feels different for some reason. I don't know why that is or what's going on, but maybe it's because it's a crisis, because all these things are going on. I think when things were sort of business as usual, it was so easy to get lost on the phone, get lost on, watching TV or some kind of information coming in, listening to podcasts or whatever. And so my sense is like we need to ground ourselves, and going out on the balcony, it can be a sort of wake-up call. Like you see, oh wow, look where I am. Like you actually see the ground. And I think with this pandemic, we're actually seeing the ground for the first time in a long time. And so the thing that kicks in, of course, there's the fear of falling, right? And what do we do about that? So my question would be, how do we ground ourselves in a good way and in a safe way? Like, how do we ground ourselves without, like falling down and just sort of just breaking, right? And like breaking ourselves. Because I think that can be a real danger. So that's what I had in mind. And hopefully we can discuss some of these things and also go back to some of the other things. And so with that, I'll pass it either to you or maybe open the floor. Or...
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Now you brought it to a perspective where I want to ask in a metaphoric way, like what does grounding to your own place, own ground, maybe grounding on your own floor, and what happens next? What's the metaphorical example for that? Alex, would you like to open that a little bit? How do we ground
I think it's
ourselves?
a great question. Yeah, I think.
And where do we ground ourselves?
Right.
Well,
yeah, I think that's a great question, and I like the way you put it with, because we all have our floor, right? We're not all of a sudden going to start living in huts. We're going to be living in the places where we're living, right? So it's, I don't know what kind of change needs to happen, but I think it's a great question. Maybe we can just open to discussion.
Joel, were you sharing?
yeah, I was just going to say, in my building, as a result of the pandemic, I have started keeping an eye on my neighbors. We have 10 units per floor, and I'm very friendly with one of our neighbors, and passing friendly with 4. One, I been a neighbor for probably 15 years, never knew their name until someone new was moving on the floor, and we sent a little letter around to everybody to, sign just to welcome them to the floor. And it's the first time I actually found out their names even. But they come from a different culture, and they, maybe are understandably hesitant about involving themselves with strangers, or maybe they're just not friendly people. I have no idea. But the thing that I wanted to say about balconies is that I think, Alex, you mentioned the idea of a spectacle at some point in time, or the philosophical perspective. And that was, of course, long before the era of screens and live television broadcasts. but still there's something very real about seeing a live person yourself. I mean, even going to the Vatican, whether you're Catholic or not, and seeing the Pope come out for an audience, there's something in the moment that's person to person. Although, of course, with 1 million people in the square, it's not very personable, but it's still something real. And that's something that I don't think we can get on a screen. We have it here to a certain extent because many of us have met each other in person and know each other and either like or dislike each other, but we have our own senses of each other. And a balcony at least lets you know from ancient times, look at this is really, the Pharaoh, or this is really Caesar. There really is a Caesar, It's not just something I heard back in the village when I was threshing my grain. And I think there's a kind of authenticity that, comes from that kind of architecture. And as Peter was saying, he doesn't have that as much in Japan, and we don't have that as much in Toronto either now. The new construction doesn't allow for balconies.
And it's interesting, skyscrapers don't have balconies. They're just like these towers of glass.
And it might be because of safety reasons. When you think of it, I remember my cousins had balconies, and we would throw water balloons, right? And I mean, as fun as that was, it still is something that you have to be careful because anybody can get hurt. Or what about that gal a couple of years ago who threw the chair over the balcony, and luckily she did not injure anybody. And it's a shame that that we have to consider about safety issues when it comes to balconies. But then it also takes away the social aspect of it, whereas you can go outside and talk with your neighbor and kind of get that sense of belonging and connecting with different people, which is, and especially what's going on with right now, is people are feeling like this self-isolation is really starting to get to them. And so in having some type of human interaction, even going out on a balcony when you are living in that high scrapers, it would be a great way of just feeling like you're human again. And maybe that comes back to your question, is like, how do you keep yourself grounded? So maybe making those human connections or talking with different people, or just even getting outside and getting some fresh air. You may not be able to have your feet on the ground, but maybe you could look up in the sky, and that can be like another way, like you feel like you're flying. So like there's so many different metaphors that you can use when you're up above.
So to piggyback on the idea of grounding, there's something meditative that on how I use my balcony. I see it as like a separate space from my living area, which has become now my workout area, work area, recreational area, and sleeping area. I mean, those after lunch naps are starting to become a common occurrence for me. Hopefully my company doesn't see this. But like being outside my balcony, like I go outside, I remove myself from my own current situation, this existence, this forced isolation. And I'm in an area where I am conductive to introspection for like this meditative state of being, right? Like my relationship to the flow of time becomes abated. All that matters to me is like my thoughts, how I feel about the current situation, the current moment, enjoying the fresh air that's afforded to me, and just taking in those moments and really just lose myself in deep thinking. Even the moments of introspection, I see it being broken by looking far out into the distance, enjoying the view of my city, I enjoy those quality moments I have outside my balcony. Like it brings back to that topic of admiration. Sure, there may not be someone to admire, but I admire the beauty of the city. I see the trees sprawling from the ground in the Danforth area because I'm overlooking the DVP. I see up ahead in the horizon. I see Lake Ontario because I'm right near the lake as well, and I see I don't know what's called. Is that bridge between the downtown and the Danforth? I see that, and I see all the cars going in and out. I see the people crossing the bridge. I see the cars in the DVP going about their ways, and I see, especially at night, I see the lights from everyone's apartment buildings. And this is how I really ground myself, by appreciating these moments, and that I never really got to experience pre-COVID, you know. And it's in a way, you kind of just stop and think, and you don't really care about how much time has passed in the balcony. Because pre-COVID, it was pretty fast paced. I'm always doing this, I'm always doing that. But by taking myself out of that situation, putting a space where I am just thinking, it's meditative.
And now I'm wondering, after hearing Joel's perspective, experience on, yeah, he has a balcony. It's not a super active balcony, but he found another area to ground himself. Like he found a way to connect with other people. So like all these high rises who don't have balcony, I think we can't just go to a point where we think, okay, there's no balcony, then there's no outer world connection. But is it the human ability to find other ways to connect? Yeah, like many high rises, they don't have balcony, but there's a new way of socializing. There are party rooms or libraries or pools or a front desk, a lobby in the building. Then I hear this human ability to bring that grounding to another level, even if there is no balcony. However, like balcony is still a privilege, because each time we speak with ourselves, with each other actually, it always came like, okay, having a balcony is a privilege where you can get out of your living area to a summer, spring, or like where you can really actually feel the air and look outside. So that's a privilege. And seeing your maybe spiritual leader or political hero in a balcony is another connection that it connects you to your ground with that person being in their own balconies. But I'm just wondering, like, what is the what comes out of human when we find ourselves belonging, when we want to belong, even if we have a balcony or not? We always try to find places to belong or to ground ourselves. And just like Carl, you were mentioning, like you find time is slower and you see more things around you. Does this have anything to do with our own selves belonging to where we are, even if we have a balcony or not?
That's sort of hard to say from my point of view, but like for me, it's like, for me, I don't really talk to my neighbors outside my balcony. It's just the only point of interaction is either through at 7:30, everyone's banging pots or pans, or outside. There is this I got there is this idea that you were in this together. This is why that when we're supporting the frontline workers, majority of people are doing it. Even on the ground, people are yelling out on the streets. There's this sense of community, this captivation of building community spirit aspect of it. And I don't know how other people view their balconies, but for me, like, it doesn't matter how much time has passed as long as you enjoy those moments you have at the balcony, right? Like, I mean, sure, it's really not about the idea of the balcony, more of how it puts you into the state of being to cultivate this community spirit, to be in this meditative stance or state of being, be introspective. The balcony could be easily replaced by a backyard, which by itself is another privilege that we've really taken for granted. Like, as I think it was Kathy or Alex that said it, like some skyscrapers don't even have balconies. They don't really have this outdoor, this liminal space to the public life. There's no way to get them fresh air unless they go outside, right?
True. And I guess it really depends where you live in the city, and I think you said it best. Even having that privilege of having a balcony or a backyard, and now that we're coming into the summer months, and they're talking about it's going to be one of the hottest summers. People are going to want when I get, what is it, hot air rises, so it gets pretty hot in the summer when you're in those tall buildings. So I mean, going outside in a balcony will give you that opportunity to get that fresh air. Again, I actually am just wondering, like, other people in their group, how is everybody feeling about having a balcony? Or if you don't have a balcony and you live in a high rise, would you like to have one? Oh, Peter, you're talking, but you're on mute.
Oh, okay.
Peter's on mute.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm on the second floor, so it's not a problem. It's easy for me to get down, but I can see how it would be a big problem. And I've heard that in Toronto now, maybe there has been for some time a rule that windows cannot be opened very much. Like, it's probably some sort of child safety thing or something like that. But I was staying in a building in Toronto a few years ago, and some of the units were air conditioned, some of them weren't. And the problem was you couldn't open the windows more than a few inches. And so you couldn't ventilate the room.
Yeah.
So I mean, that makes it even more essential. And here in Japan, many years ago when there was the tsunami in eastern Japan, this thing about saving on electricity, and they wanted people to cut down on air conditioning. It turned out to be a disaster too, because a lot of people were dying of heat stroke. But they asked people to open windows as much as possible. Well, a lot of business buildings, the windows cannot be opened. It's just impossible to open windows. So I don't know. I don't think you have that problem. I don't know how it is with office buildings there. They have to be air conditioned. You can't open a window.
Definitely a lot of the corporate buildings, they are air conditioned, but I don't see them having the ability to open up their windows.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's always a good chance, not to be a Debbie Downer by any means, but sometimes, air conditionings can break down. And so what do you do with that when you have multiple people in a room? Even I have friends who are teachers, and a lot of the old schools, they don't have proper air ventilation, whether it be heat or air, AC. And so you have teachers and kids, they're all packed in one classroom. You have maybe 30, 40 kids and a teacher, and it's like, how do you get the kids to concentrate? And even if you go outside, if it's sweltering hot. So, I mean, I think that's always going to be, I shouldn't say that's always going to be an issue, but that's definitely been an ongoing issue with, when the weather elements start changing. So.
Yeah, so in Toronto now, is it a situation where it's getting warm there now? Like, are you in a situation where you can get out easier now than you could before?
We're still in the state of an emergency, are we not?
Well, obviously, for some people, we
are.
are.
You know what? The days are just rolling into each other. To me, I just feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone.
Well, Tori was really I didn't see his finger, but I could really feel his sense of tone of speech.
I just literally shut off all news. I refuse to listen to it.
Well, because over here you can't tell. We're reading about what it depends on the province, or in the United States it depends on which state. We don't know what's going on over there exactly. So I wonder about most of you are in Toronto, I guess, and so how is it are you getting out a little more?
Now that the weather is nicer, I've noticed I've been outside a lot more. I do avoid areas with a lot of people, and which is, I mean, as some people don't actually like take this to heart, as evidence of the Trinity Bellwoods Park incident. But I do try to get outside and maybe in like non-populated areas and get that sun and get the fresh air. I do try to avoid parks because the parks are actually kind of, really packed right now.
Oh, really?
So, but yeah. Oh, like every park like that I pass by, there's like just a vast amount of people. I mean, like depends on the park, but like the ones I've seen, like Trinity Bellwoods Park, everyone's so cramped together. And it's like it's even more packed than even before COVID. It's because like I get that sense of frustration with people right now, right? Like they are just in this weird state of existence, being cramped inside all day, especially in early May and all of April. The weather has been rain, snow, and like windy and gloomy all in one day. Like even when I was working, I look out and it's snowing, and I look back to my screen, I look out again, it's sunny. Like,
We got the 4 seasons all in one day, pretty much.
like April has been a pretty gloomy month. Even in a bit of May as well. Like there's this tiredness I sense from even my coworkers or even some of my friends that they want to be outside. They need to get that fresh air. They need to get back that sense of connection with, as Alex said, to the earth, to the community, right? And it's not being realized if they just stay inside all day, right?
Yeah. Carl,
And
go ahead, Kathy.
Oh no, sorry, and especially small kids too. So with those who have small kids, I look outside my street and I see parents are riding their bikes with their kids, and so they're still practicing the social distancing. But for those who have small kids, and now that school has been canceled, a lot of parents are trying to find ways to keep their kids entertained, and kids want to go outside.
Yeah.
It's just a normal reaction, and honestly, who can blame them?
Yeah.
If we adults want to go outside, what makes us think that kids wouldn't want to? So yeah, go ahead.
I think it's the time that we really question or reason, like really which one is important. That the weather is so nice, I want to go out. I'm sorry for my child who can't go out. Or the fact that we shouldn't be going out too much, or like there should be specific things I should be mindful of, not going in the park without that space. And actually, Carl, after hearing your comments, I'd like to follow up with the value of communication and like the current this time communication and how a historical way of communication connected. Remember, we had some of our Toronto philosophy meetups. We were there together for 6 hours. We talked for a very long time,
Yes.
period, and it was really healing conversations. And I remember us talking about like what we were curious to connect the comments we found from social media on what the people in the balcony want to say to us or to each other. Especially, I was able to hear from a lady from Italy who said like, we just sing and we just look like we are singing in the balconies every evening at 7 o'clock, but it's not about singing. It's about like we were never ready for this, and we lost a lot of people, a lot of relatives or neighbors, knowing that there were big pain in the neighborhood. We came out and sang or just yelled each other on, try to communicate from balcony to balcony, and then ends all that social gathering where everybody is entering, like joining from their balcony with their national anthem. And she said it was so therapeutic that they were looking for the next day. So it was the highlight of their day, that they were remembering their loved ones who passed away. And I think they were remembering the value of living at that moment. And the funny thing is, where I want to connect, all this looks like a super traditional way, communication from balcony. It's a historical value, as we addressed, but they communicated online in daytime. They texted each other online, and they made the list of the songs, or they made the list of the people who will be the musical instrument people who will be playing the musical instruments. So there's a big social, online social media connection to that huge organization. And this same thing applies to, I saw a fitness instructor who was who was holding a fitness class. Or there are many interesting experiences, examples of what happens in the balcony. Especially, we didn't know we could do all these. We didn't know, we didn't know our potential about this.
When you have pretty bored people, you find a way to connect with others, right? My criticism for, especially my neighborhood, like, we were just banging pots and pans. Sure, it like gives you this, sense of community, but based on the videos I've seen, we could actually take it further. Like, there's huge concerts of people that chant in unison. Like, you can't, like, sure, you can bang pots and pans, but what about the community aspect of it? Like, some people like yell out in unison and in really, I guess in a way that, how do I say this? It's in a way that it becomes like it was rehearsed. Like, it feels rehearsed in a way, right? But based on what I've seen, what I know, it wasn't really rehearsed. It was just done on the fly. It was like improv, and that's something I wish we could have done right here in Canada, especially in my neighborhood. I mean, sure, banging pots and pans are a good way, but I mean, it gets old really fast. It got old after a month. But like, even some of the YouTube videos I've seen, like, there's concerts, there's opera singers, there's so many ways we could transform this balcony setting, this existence. There's something great. Like, why aren't we having any more concerts here, right? Like, just finding that time, that initiative to do these is, pretty key. And try to like synchronize with other people as well. Like, you don't want to have 3 opera singers in the same neighborhood.
I think that's what started in. I think the first was in Italy, wasn't it? It started with some guy singing operatically from his balcony in Italy, and it spread from there. But I'm really getting the different cultures slant on it here. I mean, this thing about banging pots and pans, really? I mean, I don't think you could ever do that here in Japan. I mean, somebody would come for you. I mean, first of all, I don't think there's that level of frustration. I mean, people just take it. I don't think there's a level of frustration where people would ever think they could do that. But I just can't imagine that really ever happening here. Or singing, or drawing too much attention. It would be considered drawing too much attention to yourself. That's how it would be considered in Japan. So people wouldn't do it.
Yeah, based on when I visited Japan, a lot of it was based on, responsibility and making sure you don't inconvenience others, right? Like
Oh,
there's this politeness I found with the Japanese, which I really admired. So with the whole balcony situation here, it's really just culturally, right?
yeah. Yeah, it's a
Like,
cultural thing. Things are quite, you may recall from in Japan, spaces are much closer. People are closer anyway. And so like recently I've had this problem for many, many months now, actually, of this baby crying out in the apartment behind me here, crying. This baby's been crying constantly. But the baby started crying before this pandemic came on. So now I don't really mind it so much because it's life, I don't mind it as much. And there's a lot of kids that are, I hear them playing and everything like that. I don't mind that either. I would have minded it before, but I don't mind it so much now because it's life. They can't go to school. So they're here. So it feels good in that respect.
I was going to say just on that about how close people are. So I remember when I was little, we lived in an apartment building, and there were a lot of balconies. What was interesting was the building was kind of sort of had a U shape, and so you had the balconies actually facing each other from different sides, and so like you kind of had that sense of a courtyard, and then you could see, like you could even see in other people's rooms, and you could talk over through the balconies. My experience in Canada is there isn't really that much of that here. You don't have that. Maybe it's a density thing. I'm not sure. But there's a photo that I came across earlier. I don't know if anybody saw it, but it kind of shows what that looks like. Like all of these balconies and really close density, and that's the kind of place where you could have a concert if you tried. And I guess it probably is cultural, because like in places like Europe, this is a sort of it's like being so close to each other is a kind of invitation, that we can, hey, we're here, we might as well do this. And I guess Japan is just a very different way of looking at, maybe different way of how people relate.
yeah, so I've noticed this in bars in North America as well, and comparing it to the bars in Europe based on what my other friends have been saying. Bars in Europe, especially like Ireland, are in a way that promotes human interaction with other people. Well, I found that the bars here, they're in their own enclosed booths, their own table. It doesn't really promote interaction with other groups. You're sort of in your own space. It kind of sets you up so that you are only in your own group or alone, right? There's not this communal setting. There's not this. It doesn't set up for you to actually talk to someone. Like that's what my biggest issue with the bars here. It's not constructive to just go up to a stranger and talk to them, unless it's a nightclub, which is I guess a different setting. It's not really commutative. It's more dancing, but
Yeah, yeah. I hear you. I think we have the chance to hear from Colombia now. Saulo, would you like to join the conversation? Can you unmute yourself?
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. The camera?
We can hear you now if you like. If you like, you can open up your camera too.
My camera is active.
Okay, welcome. We can see you now. Now you see me. Okay, now, okay, there you go.
Okay, thank
Welcome.
you.
Let's say welcome, Colombia. What's happening there about balconies?
Yes, it is very interesting. This thematic. this unite this tema.
This topic, yeah.
What do you think about this topic? What would you like to share with us about Colombia and balconies?
Oh, okay. It is close everything for um, uh, 50 days continue um, because pandemic COVID um, is totally boring old. Um, I am occupation my time free study.
Well, thank you for joining us. I know it's not little, a lot of pressure to speak in the second language. English is my second language too, so it might be a little overwhelming, but I appreciate you texting me and saying hi.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
I can't speak Spanish at all. So that makes it even worse. But I just wanted to echo something Peter was saying about the crying baby. I notice now when I go out, and I do go out, try to walk every day or maybe twice a day if I can. When I see kids, I used to, not pay attention to them really. I mean, I enjoy them, they're cute, but you just sort of glance at them. But now when I walk by them, I really do see them as the future and see how much more important they were than just, someone else's children. And they're much, no matter how rambunctious they get, I enjoy watching them. I'm happy to have them there. And just, the expression you use, it's life. And, it really does resonate in that way. At least for me.
Yeah.
Well, Joel, that was powerful. Now, can I ask you, I'll be ending the recording soon. And before I stop recording, can I ask you to start up the last round of conversation on how would you like this pandemic to, that we see this pandemic as like a crisis that we don't want to waste? How would you like to continue that conversation, Joel?
I guess one of the philosophy groups introduced the concept or the idea that we're living in a post-Anthropocene period. And I take this to mean that maybe the ancient biblical admonition that, man should have dominion over all the beasts of the earth and the fish in the sea, and I don't know how it all goes. I'm not really that religious myself. But what if that's just wrong? And now that we see a little tiny virus, has already killed 5 million, has already infected 5 million people that we know of. And I understand the projections are that will double by July 1st, American Independence Day and Canada Day. And the research tells us that for every one that's diagnosed, there are 15 to 20 that have been infected and survived or just carry. So maybe it's kind of a humbling thing for humanity as a whole to develop some humility about what our place in the universe is. Now, maybe that sounds a little, theological in a way, or I don't know what the word you would use, describe it, but it just dawns on me that all of our technology may not be able to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and maybe some humility on the part of our species will evolve out of this. And maybe that's just apple pie in the sky.
Wow, thank you. Any other ideas? How do we
I really
not
enjoyed
let...
that. I really enjoyed that comment he just made, Joe, but you, I am in agreement. My thoughts have been in the same align with what Joe just had to say. It's like this nature, virus being the nature, has sort of had the human being sort of on a, going through a humbling experience. Do you want to put it?
Well, it's actually not my idea. I have heard it in several of the philosophy groups in different ways, but also I've seen a lot of YouTube videos of, I don't know, there's a special breed of cat that was thought to be extinct 200 years ago, and suddenly it's seen wandering the streets in Kerala, never before seen. Or there are people hiking in the woods and the moose are walking up to them, which they never do. And a black bear with her cubs coming into the city. As we get less active and keep these other inhabitants of our planet, well, maybe that will subside quickly after things go back, but I'm not sure. I know for me, I don't think of all the other creatures that we share the planet with in quite the same way. I haven't become a vegan yet, but
I had a conversation with a friend neighbor today, and she was telling me about the first round and the second round of the pandemic in 1918 and how much more devastating the second round was from the first round. And I personally do hope that we will have learned from that experience of 1918, and we will be more careful, and hopefully we won't have that kind of second round that 1918 pandemic experience. That's my personal.
Yeah, I think in the case of the 1918 flu, I think it started to move down into areas of the world that it hadn't been previously. For example, in Africa, if you look at the map in the 1918 flu, I think of approximately 50 million people who were killed in the world. I think about 670,000 were in North America. So I think it really became a third world thing, and probably in its second year, just as a numerical fact.
Thank you, Peter. Do we have any other ideas or hopes on how to not let the pandemic crisis go away to waste without winning? And let's call this as like our last words before we stop the recording.
Well, I definitely hope that there's a more work-life balance, and I'm hoping that once people are getting out, that we look at rebuilding our communities and making it more of a stronger community than what we've than before this. I mean, I feel it's been a rat race, and sometimes I feel like being on that that pinwheel, like the hamster's on, and you're wondering when you're going to get off, kind of thing. And so hopefully I'm hoping this whole thing has actually helped people to start really putting perspective of or their priorities, like really identifying what their priorities are, and really looking at, you know, having more of a work-life type of a balance.
Which should make us more philosophical, that's for sure.
Yeah, it definitely will. That is.
So aren't we lucky we started with Toronto Philosophy Meetup, so we started at the right spot.
I mean, it's also to piggyback on Katharina, and like it really shows what you really care about in your life, right? It shows you what's really truly important to you as both the individual and, you know, and something spiritually as well. Like for me, like before the COVID, I was worried about all these different things, and now, like during the COVID crisis, I've been put in a situation where I had to really examine my life and see where I had to put my time towards, and it's only because this forced isolation kind of like forces you into this way of thinking. So like I guess, you know, just to make sure that this crisis doesn't go to waste, is take the time to be more introspective and see how you can improve your state of being, how you could find more meaning into your life even after the COVID crisis.
Definitely, and being grateful of what you do have, right? And just, yeah.
And not be scared on,
Yeah.
just, dealing with your own inner demons and dealing with, and not be scared with confronting your own emotions as well, right?
Definitely. Life is a gift, and being able to appreciate it, and even though we're inside, but still we're very fortunate of where we are and what we have.
I thought that Joel's point about humility was very important. And I was just looking up the meaning, and apparently humility actually comes from the Latin for earth. So it's a way of kind of grounding ourselves and sort of seeing we're not invincible. You know, there's so many things that are greater than us, and we have to respect those things. And so I think that's going forward. Hopefully, we'll have more awareness of that coming out of this crisis.
So just in case this gets too serious, I want to tell you the story about the three philosophers: the Stoic, the Epicurean, and the existentialist. And they're discussing what's the ultimate purpose of life. And the Stoic says, well, at my funeral, I'd like people to walk by my casket and say that he had lived a good and honorable life and filled his duties. And the Epicurean said, well, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I would like to know that I have reached and touched people and loved and been loved deeply. And the existentialist said, I'd like them to say, he's moving.
Wow.
Huh, he's moving. Huh.
Heartwarming. That sounds like a James Bond movie line.
Recognize that voice. Are you in Texas?
I sure am.
Oh yeah,
Howdy.
nice to see you.
Hi, Sam.
How are you doing?
So we really have an international group today. We've got Texas, Japan, and Colombia. Everybody else is Toronto-based pretty much.
Where are you from, Joel?
Keep in mind, Texas
I'm
is a
in
country.
Toronto. I like to say I'm part of a dying breed. I'm a native Torontonian. Everybody from Toronto is from someplace else, but I was born here and I've lived here all my life, although I've traveled a bit.
Thank you, Joel. So thanks everyone for your sharings and very honest, clear opinion on this time. We're going through historical times. It's the time where we are able to really discover the potential to face the fears or what we don't know. But when I was researching about this balcony and history connection, one thing came to my mind, which is really, I think, a good way to end this meeting is, I'm going to read it here. Balconies are reminding people of the importance to look outside and connect with something bigger than themselves. So I think our potential to connect with something bigger than ourselves might carry us to our balcony where we can get some fresh air, or maybe our spiritual balcony where we can connect with the ground or people around us. I appreciate your time and participants today, and I'm gonna now stop recording. Thank you for joining us. Today is May 24th. We are just finishing up the balcony panel named "What Happens in the Balcony Stays in the History." Hope to meet at some other meetups. Bye.